So today we're embarking on another table that's going to be a fairly large table. It's 64 inches long, 15 inches wide, and the legs on either end are 12 inches wide. The table itself, I'll put up a sketch here so you can see what the table looks like. So a rather oblong, an oval shaped table. Solid legs at each end. So we're starting off by just getting these legs squared up using a sled. Sometimes you've seen me use a bed rail clamped to the side, but I'm going to use this jig today to avoid putting a screw hole into this piece as these edges are going to be finished edges. So I want to minimize the marking on them if I can. So I'll run this through the sled. This way I'll get a square side on each of these four pieces, then flip them over and get a square side on the opposite side. Then I can glue these together. So I have another set of legs or set of pieces set up that I'll do next. But I'll get these things all done, cut, and then glue them together. So as the glue up is progressing, we've got the first leg section. Those pieces have been glued up. I've got the pieces for the second leg section. It's actually the leg, cut or ready to be glued. And this is the top, all the components for the top. So we'll do a little bit more work on that before we glue up. But for now, let me get this second leg glued and clamped. And then we can start fiddling with the puzzle that represents the top. So I have laid out the pieces for the top, probably in what I think will be the best orientation for them. And what I'm looking for now is ways to minimize the defects in the wood. So for example, there's some nail holes here. I'd like to eliminate those, and I want to make sure that I have enough room. So I have roughly marked out the 64 inches of the table and drawn with a beam compass a rough line of where that circle is going to end on both sides. So that shows me how much room I have left on each piece. So for example, on this piece, it was the circle came out here, and I thought, well, okay, I got about 2 inches before I get into that wood, so I can move that down a little bit, pushing the other end down and giving me a little bit more room there. So it's just this kind of juggling that I'm doing at the moment. Here's a good example of some cuts that I think I can make, or a cut that I can make. So I've got this scruffy bit of wood in here. If I get rid of that, let's say about 1.5 inches. Well, I know at this end, I have about 1.5 inches that's going to get cut off with that circle. So yes, I can afford that 1.5 inch cut there. So I'm going to cut that off. I'm going to make a cut here. I'm going to make a couple cuts here to get rid of these holes, and so on. So that's kind of the point that we're at, just to get best edges possible. And of course, wherever there's a join, like right here, I'm just going to square that joint up. I don't have a lot of room to spare, just a little bit. I'm going to take about a 3/8 off there, and then just square off every joint, just so that when it gets glued together, it'll be good. So I've made all the squared off cuts. The pieces are going to join beautifully. I'm quite happy with that. I got rid of some of the scuff, some of the scrap material between the two pieces, so that's going to look okay. The next bit, because I'm working with some very tight tolerances here, I want to make sure that the pieces, when I glue them together, are lined up as accurately as possible. So I have just spent some time making sure that, if this is the end of the piece and the curve comes around like this, you can see there's not a lot of room left over on these pieces. So I'm going to be drawing a line straight across every piece, probably in multiple locations, just so that it is easy to line them up as they're glued together. When they're all glued together, I'll cut them off here. I'm not going to do that until I'm happy that they're glued up right. And then we'll take them over to the router sled and level them all up. So right now I just want to make sure that I got good clean edges on them, so they're going to glue together well. and then we'll take care of the surface top and bottom on the router sled. So looking at this top, it's a lot of pieces to try and get together. So what I've decided to do is do it in actually 3 steps. The first step will be gluing these 3 boards, 3 rows together. The next step will glue those 3 rows together, and finally third step, gluing the whole thing together. I think that'll be a little bit easier to kind of coordinate and organize, so I'll get gluing on that now. All right, there's half the top glued up. I'm glad I did that actually in just half, because as it turns out I had forgotten to square off this end. So there's quite a gap here. I was able, as I was gluing the thing together, I glued up everything else, took out this piece, and then squared it off and put it back into the glue. So glad I caught that in time. That would be a real nasty aberration to have to deal with. So we're glued up, half of it's glued up. I'm going to let that set, run overnight, and then we'll glue the other half tomorrow morning. All right, next morning, we got half of the top glued together. So I'm going to set up the pieces here to glue them together. One of the things that I do, just to kind of help me keep things straight, is I label every board that I'm working with. So here's 4A, here's 4B, which means when I set them up for gluing, they'll be set up like that. 4A on the left, 4B on the right. The numbers facing me, the orientation of the numbers tells me this is the top and that's the bottom. So it really helps me kind of get things when I lay them out, get them in the right order. The other thing that I do as I'm cutting the wood is I label the side, the A side and the B side. I can't really see my writing there very well. It doesn't show up. There we are, A and B. A and B refers to the orientation in which it goes through the saw. And I'll just clear off the table a little bit and then I can show you what I mean by that. So here's a little bit of what I'm trying to get at with this A-B orientation. Ideally, the saw blade is perfectly vertical, perfectly 90 degrees to the table. That's ideally. What I have found in practice is that it may be 89.99 degrees, but not 90 degrees. And as a result, if I bring 2 boards together that are cut on the same side of the blade, they may not meet at the right angle. So, however, what I do know is that if I have a board that is cut on this side of the blade, meeting up with a face that went through on this side of the blade, then they are going to meet perfectly level. So the cut on this side, I'm pointing with my other finger, so the cut on this side may be 89.9, let's just call it 89 degrees, but the cut on this side is going to be 91 degrees, the total makes 180, so they're going to be perfectly, they're going to meet up and be perfect. So when I cut, make one cut, pushing the wood through this way, the next cut that I want to make will have to be that way, and that will give, when this piece goes through upside down with the A side down, it means that this side is going to be perfectly parallel to this side, meaning that when 2 pieces join, they are going to meet perfectly 180 degrees, like a perfectly flat surface. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, it's working, but that's why you may see, as you look on all the pieces as I'm gluing them together, an A and a B. I want to make sure that the A butts up against the B side, the B butts up against the A side. So I'm going to lay out the other half of the top and get that glued together now. All right, we're all laid up for gluing. You can see I've got 4AB butted up against 4B. We've got 5A butted up against 5B and 6A against 6B. On top of all of that, I have these lines that help me line up the pieces to make sure that I have them in the right orientation lengthwise. So kind of keeping those, getting the pieces now in the right order with 5A, 5B, 6A, 6B, 4A, 4B. Now, as I glue them together, I just have to make sure that I get these lines in the correct orientation as I put the clamps on. So we'll get started with that. Alrighty, the second half of the tabletop is glued together. So I'm going to take off the clamps and then glue the two halves together. I need more clamps. I'm observing as I bring these two pieces together that it seems like I have two B edges going together, not an A and a B. That was a mistake. So to correct that, I might just run this piece through the table saw again, just to kind of give a nicer edge there. Okay, I've got decided what I'm going to do. I'm going to run this through and just straighten up this side so it will match with the other piece and we won't have a warped top. So I've got my outfeed roller set up down there. Don't panic. As the wood gets over there, it's going to be supported at that end. Okay, I'll put that back together and see how it looks. Okay, I got our edge here true and straight the way that I want it. A couple of the clamps I was using on the previous glue ups aren't long enough, so I've swapped in some pipe clamps, which I'm going to put on the underside, and the rest of the clamps will be on the top side. And yeah, we're ready. Oh, I had one little chip that popped out here. So I'm going to put some glue on and insert that back in during the process. So if you see me fiddling here, that's what it is. Again, I'm focusing a little bit of effort. I want to make sure that my alignment marks are in alignment. Okay, put some glue on this edge. Some of you may be wondering why I'm not using dowels or biscuits or something for alignment. And I really don't think I need to worry about that right now. The pieces are very rough lumber. So I'm going to be using the router sled to even it all up. And I'm just kind of getting it within, I'm going to call it within eye shot of what I think is going to be reasonable for leveling. If these pieces were finished pieces, then I definitely would be using some alignment pins. Alrighty, here we go. out of alignment about 1/4 of an inch. And I don't want that. That'll work. On this end down here, I'm just kind of going by feel on the under edge to make sure I have a reasonable, like I said, reasonable alignment. I'm going to get one more pipe clamp for the top here. I'm getting some decent squeeze out here, so I'm pleased with that. That's good. Alrighty, I think we're glued up. So we're going to let that dry, and then we can take both this top and our 2 leg pieces over to the router sled and get them cleaned up. So I cleared off the work table. Sawmill is parked down at the other end. I got my Bed Rail Router Sled set up, and we've put the first leg of our oak console table on the router sled, and I'm going to make a few passes on this. My first pass is just going to kiss the top of the wood about here and just at the other end. Then I'm going to come down a 32nd of an inch on subsequent passes just until we've cleaned off the top of this piece, and we can flip it over and get a nice parallel edge on the other side. So I'll set the camera up and you can see what happens. Now this tool, I know, is, I'll call it the dirtiest tool in terms of throwing chips everywhere. So yes, I do have dust collection planned for this. We'll have some sort of a hose adapter here and some bristles around to kind of contain some of the dust, but that's going to take a little bit. So I need to get this leg done first, so on we go. So I put on my shop coat for this job. I also have some hearing protection in place. This tool is loud. So as expected, I just kissed the surface in these 2 spots here. So we'll come down a 32nd of an inch and you'll start to see a few more chips fly. So just a 32nd of an inch made quite a difference. Already we have a full pass on this piece of wood and almost a full pass on this. Just a little section here and almost a full pass here. And we are really close to this. The next 32nd of an inch is going to be touching the whole bit. This will probably get cleaned up almost entirely. May need to go a little more, but just small increments makes a huge difference. So after making 4 passes, the first was just kissing off here and here. We're down 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to go one more pass at a 32nd of an inch. That'll probably leave a little bit in here, and it will probably leave a bit in here. I'm not terribly worried about that right now. The edges of these legs are going to be given a full round over, so that'll cut it back into here quite a bit, and a little bit more sanding, and we should be okay. Also, I kind of like the pieces to have a little bit of an organic feel to them. So if there's a little bit of a dip here, that's going to be all right. So one more 32nd, that'll be our final pass on this side, then we can flip it over and do the other. So this piece needs to be 12 inches wide. Currently, I'm at 12.5, so a 12-inch edge is going to come to here. So all that gets cut off, so I'm not worried about that bit. And then there's going to be a round over, so we'll come in another 1/2 inch, which means I only have this little piece here, which will need to be dealt with for sanding. Over here, we have another 1/2 inch coming in for the round over. So this little light bit here will need to be dealt with in terms of sanding. The rest, I'm very happy with how that came out. So we'll flip it over and do the other side. So here's our results after finishing up with the router sled. The piece is nice and even. And just kind of as that's a before and that's an after. Router sled does a wonderful job. So I'm going to call this piece done. That's one leg. So I'll do up the other leg. I'll do that off camera. And then I'll put the tabletop on the router sled and show you how I go about tacking that. I'll do the other leg first. So I have the 2 legs now done, leveled up on both sides. And I have set the top on the work table. But I do have a bit of a problem. I'm going to have to move the sawmill, going to have to lift that up off the table. With the extended bed rails though, the router sled is going to be able to handle this tabletop just fine. I do have to make an adjustment on my work table to handle, you can see I have these little clamps that pop into holes that I've drilled on my work table. But the current hole that opposite of this clamp is right about here, so I need to drill another hole out here a little bit. I had plans to do that anyway, I just hadn't got around to doing it. So, modification to the work table, get the sawmill hoisted off the table, and then we're ready to go. So I'm going to end this video here. Stay tuned for part 2. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe.